Hey guys, tonight we trudge through the fog-soaked morning of a medieval village, where you live, breathe, and work under the cranky thumb of your local lord. It's damp, your socks are made of wool, if you even own socks, and the rooster doesn't care that you're tired. A bell tolls from the manor. That's your alarm clock. You've got chickens to feed, maybe taxes to dodge, and your body aches from sleeping on straw stuffed with whatever the dog dragged in. Oh, and let's be honest, you probably won't survive this century. Sorry. Between disease, famine, and falling off a hay cart, the odds aren't fabulous. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when people are listening in. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up with a crick in your neck, a whiff of mold in your nose, and the low groan of your older brother kicking you in his sleep. Your family, 6 people and at least 2 livestock, shares this one-room timber-framed cottage with its sagging thatch roof and dirt floor. Morning light peeks in through slatted shutters, filtered through mist and the smoke of dozens of hearths, coming to life. You breathe it in. It tastes like wood ash, wet wool, and boiled turnip. You throw off the blanket, scratchy wool naturally, and slide your feet into a pair of stiff shoes with wooden soles. Somewhere outside, your village is waking up. You hear the distant lowing of cows, a yawn followed by a string of medieval curses. Yes, even then people needed coffee. And the creak of the manor bell tower. The manor lord owns this land, and, technically, he owns you too. You're a villain, a peasant bound to this land by 1,000 invisible threads of feudal duty. You're not quite a slave, but let's not kid ourselves. If you leave without permission, someone will notice. You owe him work, loyalty, and a certain number of eggs per season. Feudalism. Great for lords, terrible for your lower back. You slip outside into the gray chill, breath misting as the frost crunches underfoot. It's not snowing yet, but the morning air bites your ears and makes you pull your cloak tighter. You don't have gloves. No one in your hut does. Your hands are red and cracked, and it's not even midwinter yet. You shuffle toward the village green where the bailiff is already hollering instructions like he's the star of some dismal, hay-scented musical. You owe a few days of labor this week, and he's here to remind you. Something about mending fences and repairing a ditch. You're hoping he forgets. On your way, you pass the smithy. The blacksmith, whose arms are the size of small logs, nods as you pass. His forge glows inside, like a dragon's belly. He's important. Everyone needs nails, horseshoes, and the occasional sword, though not for you. You're more bucket and hoe level. Children dart between legs, one of them suspiciously shoeless. A dog barks, someone's pig grunts happily in. A muddy puddle, and a trio of nuns from the nearby convent huddle by a well, whispering and giggling. Even the religious can't resist good gossip. Your stomach growls. You try not to think about breakfast yet. First, you head toward the Lord's grain barn to report in. Today's work is recorded by the reeve, another peasant, but one with a little too much enthusiasm for record-keeping. He smells like onions and power. While you wait, you catch sight of the manor house looming in the distance. It's the biggest building for miles, with actual glass in its windows. Well, one window, maybe two, and solid oak doors. The Lord and his family live like royalty compared to you, though compared to modern plumbing, they're just well-fed campers. They've got servants, a private garden, and rumor has it, the lady owns a velvet dress. Scandalous. The fields beyond stretch out under a low gray sky. You know them well. Where the barley grows, where the peas never quite take, and where a cow once panicked and flattened 3 villagers in a stampede. Historians still argue whether that cow was cursed or just moody. As you get your work assignment, the bailiff drones on about a missing sheep, 2 broken carts, and some bandits spotted near the woods. You mentally check out. Your mind drifts to a dream you had last night. Something about floating bread and a talking chicken. You'll forget it by lunch. One historical nugget worth knowing. Most people in your position live in roughly the same spot their entire lives. Travel is rare and dangerous. Roads are muddy ruts, bandits are real, and inns, where they exist, smell like cabbage and regret. You once met a traveling minstrel, and he smelled like 5 villages, and none of them good. As the line thins, the air grows colder. You stamp your feet and try not to think about how long the day will be, and winter's just starting. You'll be spending a lot more time indoors soon, huddled around the hearth, swapping stories and fleas. Fun times. Oh, and that cheeky bit about owing your lord chickens? Yeah, that's legit. Part of your rent might include delivering a set number of eggs, hens, or even live geese. They're a form of currency. Hope yours don't escape, again. You glance up at the sky. Cloudy, as always. The crows caw overhead, perched on bare branches like little judges in black robes. One of them stares directly at you. You decide not to read into it. Probably. The village is fully awake now. Smoke rises from every chimney. The path is churning to mud, and someone's yelling about a pig theft. Another day in the 14th century. You shuffle back toward your hut, the smell of wood smoke curling into your nostrils and your stomach reminding you that breakfast, whatever it is, had better be warm. The cold air has made your nose run, and your toes feel like 2 frozen root vegetables jammed into stiff leather shoes. As you pass the communal bakehouse, you catch a whiff of scorched barley crust, and your stomach makes a sound like an angry goose. Someone's already queued up for their weekly bake. Villagers prepare dough at home, then line up to use the Lord's oven. And yes, you pay for that privilege. In bread. To use the oven to bake bread. Delicious medieval irony. Inside your home, the hearth glows dimly, coaxed to life with damp twigs and last summer's dung bricks. The smell is earthy, smoky, kind of like someone tried to grill a mushroom in a cow pasture. You're used to it. It's not home without that signature medieval funk. On the hearthstone sits your morning meal, not waiting, just sitting, bubbling faintly in a battered iron pot. It's gruel again. Oats, maybe some barley if you're lucky, stirred with water and on special occasions, a tiny splash of milk. No sugar, no cinnamon, no apologies. You grab a spoon carved from wood, smooth with use and probably older than you, and take a bite. Warm, bland, slightly gritty, but it's food, and it'll keep you upright. Barely. Gruel is your breakfast, your sometimes lunch, and your fallback dinner. It's the gray, gluey glue holding your life together. Historians still argue whether medieval gruel was deliberately bland or if people just gave up trying to make oats interesting after year 6 of famine. But if it's winter or your harvest flopped, gruel might be the only thing between you and collapsing in a turnip field. You eat it slowly, staring at the smoke curling up toward the hole in your roof. The hole is your chimney. Fireplaces are for the rich. You just let the smoke do its thing, which usually means settling into the thatch and making your hair smell like bacon that lost its will to live. Beside you, your sister stirs, swaddled in wool and muttering about mice stealing her last bit of dried apple. She's not wrong. Mice run this place. You're just visiting. Your mother hands you a chunk of dark rye bread, dense, chewy, probably older than your dreams. It's sour from age, flecked with little seeds, and could double as a self-defense weapon in a tight spot. You dip it into your gruel, chew slowly, and dream of meat. You haven't had any in weeks. Maybe if you catch a squirrel later. The cottage. Walls are decorated with practical things. Hooks for tools, bundles of drying herbs, and a few wooden bowls that nestle into one another like sleeping pigs. No artwork, no family portraits, just one rough wooden cross above the hearth, soot-darkened and silently judging. A cat weaves between your legs. Or maybe it's the neighbors. Ownership is a loose concept when it comes to medieval cats. It eyes your bread and flicks its tail. You eye it back. You've had worse breakfast companions. You finish eating, your body slowly warming, and glance toward the back of the room where the grain sack sits, half empty, guarded like a dragon's hoard. Every handful is precious. You remember when old Hob forgot to close his sack one night, woke up to a dozen rats throwing a tiny medieval party in his oats. Still chewing, you step outside to rinse your mouth at the communal trough. Yes, you use the same trough as the livestock. No, you don't want to talk about it. You hear your neighbor Agnes arguing with her daughter over whose turn it is to scrape out the pot. It's a lively debate. Apparently, yesterday's barley stew had a lentil in it. A lentil. This is newsworthy. As you head back inside to grab your tools for the morning chores, you pass the corner where you keep dried onions and a suspiciously squishy turnip. You make a mental note to inspect it later, or never. You think back to the festival last week. There was actual cheese. A wheel of soft, tangy goat cheese brought by a traveling friar who claimed it was blessed by St. Hugh himself. Even your dreams are full of food. Meat pies, roast fowl, sugared almonds you'll never taste. One time you dreamed of an orange. Just one. You wept a little when you woke up. Food is currency here, literally. You can pay rent in eggs, barter, labor for a chunk of salted pork, or seduce someone with a nice wheel of cheese. Romantic, really. You grab your work satchel, a stiff leather thing that smells like sheep and despair, and your dull little sickle, and head out again. The sun is creeping over the horizon now, still half lost behind low clouds. You pass the alewife's house. She's brewing again, her whole place stinking of warm yeast and boiled herbs. Everyone drinks ale, even kids. It's safer than water, which has a habit of carrying things like dysentery and existential dread. Back at your own hearth, your mother hums a slow tune while scraping the pot. You hear your youngest siblings sneezing in their sleep. Probably nothing, or the beginning of something you can't afford. There's a healer in the village, but her best remedy involves wrapping someone in nettles and whispering to a rock. One fun little fact: medieval folk genuinely believed that a toad, dried in the sun and worn around your neck, could ward off illness. Fringe, yes, but honestly, it probably didn't smell worse than the neighbor's dog. Breakfast is over. You're not full, not really. Just slightly less hollow. But there's work to be done. There's always work to be done. And while you've eaten today, there's no guarantee about tomorrow. You live season to season, storm to storm, hoping that this year the barley will come up strong and the beans don't rot in the pod. Hope is the most important thing on your table. Right after, gruel. You swing your satchel over your shoulder and head back out, ducking under a low beam, boots squishing into the mud again. You sigh. The day is just beginning. The sun's barely cleared the trees and already your boots are caked in muck, your breath forming little clouds as you trudge down the narrow village path. Morning chores await, and like most medieval tasks, they involve mud, smells, and a high probability of injury by livestock. You start at the animal pen. The pigs are awake and demanding breakfast with grunts that sound eerily judgmental. You unlatch the crude wooden gate, step into the muck, and immediately regret every life decision. The pig pen is half mud, half questionable puddle, and entirely your problem. You try to coax the sow over with a handful of wilted cabbage leaves. She snorts and eats them like a queen, then promptly tries to eat your shoe. You move on to the chickens. They're easier to manage but louder, peckier, and endlessly plotting. One of them, Big Maud, has been eyeing your fingers lately with sinister intent. You mutter something about fried drumsticks and collect the eggs quickly. One of them is cracked. So are your knuckles. The goat, of course, hates you. Her name is Blodwyn and she was probably born angry. You attempt to milk her while she attempts to kick your spleen into next Tuesday. You get about half a cup before she knocks the pail over with her hoof and stares you down like you owe her money. You sigh and lean against the fence. Your hands are cold, your back hurts, and the day has barely begun. Somewhere in the distance, someone's yelling about a runaway ox. You don't even blink. Just another Tuesday. You rinse your hands in a nearby trough, trying to ignore the frog lounging in it like it pays rent. Clean is relative after all. You dry your hands on your tunic, which is now mostly dirt with some tunic attached. Time to muck out the stall. This is a special kind of joy that involves shoveling hay, dung, and all your remaining dignity into a wheelbarrow. The wheel squeaks like it's protesting medieval life just as much as you are. This is the part of peasant life they never put in the tapestries. Everyone remembers the knights and castles and tournaments. No one wants to depict Geoffrey the muck boy ankle-deep in pig slurry. And yet, this was daily reality for most of the population. There were no vacation days, no spa weekends, just chores, and more chores, and maybe a second bowl of gruel if you really earned it. As you work, your neighbor Roger leans over the fence and grins. He's missing 2 teeth and always has unsolicited opinions about your technique. You're pitching wrong, he drawls. You gotta flick it, not lob it. You nod and keep lobbing. Roger once set his own haystack on fire accidentally, After a poorly judged candle experiment, you take his advice with a grain of salt, and maybe a fire bucket. Eventually, you finish the stalls and stop to stretch your aching back. The sun is climbing now, painting the thatch roofs in soft gold, though it doesn't make them any less leaky. A few kids dash past with sticks, chasing a goose that's clearly winning. You watch for a moment. It's the most entertainment you'll get until the next feast day. You take a detour past the communal pasture. The sheep are grazing peacefully, or pretending to. They're fluffier than they are clever, and one of them is eating a boot. Probably Roger's. Along the path you spot something rare. A hedgehog, waddling through the underbrush like it's late for a tiny meeting. In some parts of England, people believed hedgehogs stole milk from cows at night. Historians still argue whether that idea came from observation or boredom-induced hallucination. You stop at your family's plot next. It's your little garden, your lifeline. Rows of cabbage, leeks, beans, and maybe a few stubborn carrots if the soil behaves. You pull weeds and check for signs of frostbite or rot. The earth smells rich and familiar. A blend of damp soil, crushed leaves, and toil. You spot a few slug trails and sigh. The eternal battle. You flick one off a cabbage with practiced grace and mutter, "Not today, Jeffrey," even though the slug has no idea what you're saying. A hawk cries overhead, and you glance up. Birds of prey are both beautiful and annoying, especially when they snatch your only laying hen. By now, your fingers are stiff and sore, and you're counting the minutes until midday. Not because there's a break, there probably isn't, but because it marks the turning point. Survive till then, and you're halfway through. Your father calls you over to help patch the fence. Again. Some planks rotted through, and he's already knee-deep in mud and sarcasm. You grab a hammerstone and some bent nails, doing your best to reinforce something that probably won't last the winter. As you work, your father tells a story about a fox he saw near the woodline. His version involves glowing eyes, unnatural silence, and maybe witchcraft. Historians still debate how seriously villagers took tales of shapeshifters and enchanted animals. But based on the way your dad keeps crossing himself, he's pretty convinced. By the time you finish, your arms are jelly, and your stomach is sending urgent messages to your brain. But lunch is still a while off, and there's more to do, like carrying water from the stream. You grab 2 buckets, head down the sloping path, and brace yourself for the worst part of your day, hauling water. The stream is lovely to look at, less lovely to lift from. The buckets fill slowly, the wood creaking, and your hands going numb in the icy flow. Then comes the walk back, 2 sloshing buckets, aching shoulders, and 1,000 opportunities to trip over a chicken. You finally stagger home, drop the buckets by the hearth, and collapse onto the bench with a groan. Your mother hands you a small lump of cold porridge and a chunk of cheese the size of a dice. A feast by some standards. You savor every bite while eyeing the cat. It's not glamorous, this life. It's not easy, or clean, or fair. But it's yours. You survived the morning, and the goat only kicked you once. A win by medieval standards. Lunch doesn't linger. It slips down your throat with all the enthusiasm of wet hay and is gone before your stomach even realizes what happened. But there's no time to feel sorry for yourself. Afternoons are for field work. And like every good medieval peasant, You've got fields that need walking, weeding, worrying over, and occasionally yelling at. You grab your worn hoe and a small sack of seed, brush off your tunic, mostly dirt, and head toward the strip fields beyond the village. Your patch lies in the open field system, a method as democratic as mud. Everyone gets long, narrow strips of land spread across different fields, rotated, yearly, so nobody gets stuck with all the bad soil. The Lord, of course, gets the best bits. But hey, that's feudalism for you. Trickle-down dirt. You reach your strip and stare at the soil like it owes you an apology. It's stiff today, still clinging to last night's frost, and your first few strikes with the hoe bounce back with a satisfying thud and an unsatisfying jolt to your elbow. You sigh and start the rhythm. Chop, step, pull, scatter. It's like a medieval dance, but nobody's clapping. The field around you murmurs with quiet labor. Other villagers are out too. Rows of hunched backs, bent knees, and heads wrapped in wool. The air carries the scent of turned earth, sheep in the distance, and someone's lunch stewing over an outdoor fire, probably cabbage again. You envy it anyway. You remember your cousin once claimed she saw a fairy circle in this very field, mushrooms growing in a perfect ring. She swore it was a portal to another world, or at least a world with better vegetables. Historians still argue whether such stories were taken seriously or served mostly as village gossip with magical flair. You pause to stretch your back, which cracks in protest. The sun is higher now, filtered through gray clouds and leafless trees. Crows hop nearby, watching you, judging. You consider yelling at them, but remember last time someone did that and ended up with bird droppings on their hood. Probably a coincidence. Probably. A boy named Edwin trots past with a bundle of firewood strapped to his back and a face that says, "I've been doing this since I could walk." Which is true. Medieval childhood ends around age 7, right about when you're trusted not to drop the scythe on your own foot. You turn your attention back to the soil. It's been a rough season. Too much rain in spring, not enough in summer. The barley came up thin and patchy, and the beans didn't even bother. You rake the rows with fresh worry, wondering whether next season will be better, or just a new shape of bad. You spot something unusual glinting in the dirt. A tiny shard of old pottery, blue and white, imported once. Maybe dropped by a merchant or fallen from a cart. It's a reminder that sometimes the wider world brushes up against your little village. But not often. Here, the days repeat like stories told by an old man who refuses to learn new material. A breeze picks up, carrying the scent of smoke and moss. It slips under your tunic and makes you shiver. You pull your hood up and keep working, the dirt collecting under your fingernails like a secret. A very grimy secret. Time slows out here. You measure it in shadows and aches, in the shifting chorus of birds and the slow rotation of sheep across the hillside. Occasionally you chat with a neighboring worker. Today, it's Elfrida, who always knows what everyone's doing and whom they're doing it with. "Did you hear about Thomas?" she asks without looking up from her row. You shake your head. Fell asleep in the granary. Woke up with a rat in his boot. You raise an eyebrow. "A big one," she adds with relish. You file that away as both terrifying and somehow unsurprising. Granaries aren't exactly secure. The Lord Steward locks up the best stuff, But whatever's left over, for the villagers, often ends up shared with the rodent population. You keep hoeing. The rhythm settles in, and your thoughts start to drift. You imagine being a reeve someday, appointed to oversee the work of the village, settle disputes, and maybe even collect rents. Sounds nice until you remember the reeve gets yelled at, by both villagers and the lord. It's basically medieval middle management. Eventually, the clouds thicken, and the first soft flakes of snow start to drift down. You glance upward, squinting. It's early for snow. Too early. That bodes poorly. You tighten your cloak and pick up the pace. If winter comes in hard, even a good harvest won't last. You finish your row and trudge back toward the village, your boots now lined with fresh mud, your muscles buzzing with exhaustion. Along the way, you pass the edge of the Lord's domain, his personal land, worked by laborers like you, but for his benefit. It's better maintained, of course, straighter rows, thicker hedges. Someone even carved little initials into one of the trees. Probably stay out or get flogged. You reach the village well and pause to drink. The water tastes of moss and iron, but it's cold and refreshing. You splash your face, letting the chill soak into your skin. A rooster struts past you like it owns the place, and you briefly consider wrestling it for dominance. You decide against it. That rooster's been in fights. You check your pockets. Just a bit of string, a bent spoon, and one dried plum you were saving. You eat the plum. It's not juicy anymore, but it's sweet enough to make you sigh with gratitude. You might not have a feast, but you've got small victories. You pass by the carpenter's workshop on the way home. He's carving a new yoke for the oxen, the wood chips curling like tiny ribbons around his feet. You pause to watch. There's something soothing about it. His knife gliding with confidence. The way the wood sings under pressure. You wonder if he dreams of carving anything other than tools. Finally, you reach home. Your family is already gathering. The hearth is glowing a little brighter, and the smell of turnip stew, possibly enhanced with actual herbs, greets you like a warm hug from a scratchy ant. You sit down hard, boots squelching, bones creaking. You've earned the ache. You've earned the stew. You're halfway through the day. The work continues tomorrow. The stew is still bubbling when your mother ladles it out, one steaming bowl at a time. It's mostly broth with turnips and a few root vegetables. But someone must have added a pinch of salt, and that qualifies it as a delicacy. You sip it slowly, savoring the warmth as it fills your belly and softens the edges of your exhaustion. Around the fire, the family eats with quiet concentration. There's very little talking at mealtime, mostly chewing, slurping, and the occasional grunt of approval. Your younger brother fumbles a chunk of parsnip with his fingers and drops it to the floor. The dog, whose name is probably something like dog, devours it instantly and then resumes staring at the bowl in your hands like it's a religious relic. After the meal, there's still work to be done, but indoors now. The firelight casts flickering shadows on the wattle and daub walls as your mother takes out her spinning distaff. You, meanwhile, are handed a bundle of rushes for floor strewing. Some of them are scented with dried herbs, mostly to mask the delightful aroma of unwashed peasant feet and whatever the dog dragged in. Rush strewing is more than medieval housekeeping. It's low-effort pest control. The herbs in the rushes sometimes help repel fleas, although historians still argue whether they were actually effective or just made everything smell vaguely like soup. Either way, you scatter the rushes across the floor like a wizard trying to summon cleanliness. You sit on the edge of the low bench and take out a small wooden carving you've been working on. An animal of some sort. It might be a sheep, or a bear, or a sheep that wants to be a bear. Your knife is dull, and your fingers are stiff, but the rhythm is comforting. One curl of wood at a time. The evening passes like this. Quiet hands, crackling fire, soft murmurs about who saw what in the woods. Someone swears they spotted a green light near the old mill. Another mentions a crow flying backward, which definitely means something bad. You nod solemnly. You've no idea what it means, but it probably involves rain. Your father begins repairing a net by firelight. One of the older fishing nets that's more holes than rope now. He works slowly, patiently, threading and tying. Fishing isn't your village's main trade, but the stream nearby provides enough for the occasional catch, especially in spring. Mostly eels, the slimy, wiggling kind. You still remember the time one slapped you in the face. You try not to remember the sound. As night deepens, you hear the village priest pass by outside, humming a hymn and carrying a lantern that bobs like a firefly. He's likely returning from a visit to a sick villager. Medicine, if you can call it that, usually means prayers, herbs, or being bled with a knife. If you survive, it's a miracle. If you don't, well, the priest knows the words. You're tasked next with checking the chickens one last time. You pull on your cloak, wrap a scarf around your head, and step into the chill. The sky above is dense with stars, more than you remembered it having, glittering cold and sharp as needles. The moon is a thin crescent, like someone took a bite out of it. You reach the coop and open the creaky door. The hens blink at you, grumpy and half asleep. Big Maud is perched smugly, probably dreaming of rebellion. You make sure the latch is secure and that the gaps are stuffed with straw. Foxes are clever, and chickens are not. Back inside, your little sister is already asleep on a straw-stuffed mattress. Her face is smudged with soot and sleep, and her thumb is still halfway in her mouth. Your mother lays another rush mat down, nearby, and motions for you to get ready. It's your turn to help with the nighttime weaving. Weaving is essential. Cloth doesn't make itself, and you can't wear the same tunic forever, even if it smells like you have. The loom creaks gently under your hands as your mother shows you how to shuttle the weft through the warp. Over and under, tug and pull, tighten and tap. The rhythm is steadying, like a lullaby made of thread. You ask her where she learned this. She tells you her mother taught her, and her mother before that. That's how most things are passed down. Not in books, but in calloused hands and tired eyes. Suddenly you hear distant bells. Faint, rhythmic tolls from the abbey several miles away. They ring at fixed times, calling monks to prayer, but they also help mark time for the entire countryside. No clocks here, just bells, bird song, and the occasional drunk shouting at the moon. Back by the fire, your father tells a tale to no one, in particular. It's about the time he met a pilgrim from the south who claimed to have seen a city where the buildings were made of white stone, and people bathed every day. Your father chuckles. Sounds like a lie, he says. You're inclined to agree. Your grandmother mutters that she once met a man with 2 thumbs on one hand. Historians still argue whether this was a common mutation or just one of those things grandmas say after 2 sips of cider. Eventually, you're allowed to rest. Your sleeping mat is lumpy, the blanket thin, and there's a draft coming through the window shutter, but you've never been more grateful. You curl up on your side, hands still smelling faintly of wood shavings and barley. As the fire dies down to embers, your family settles in one by one. Your mother murmurs a short prayer. Your father snores almost immediately, like a bear wearing a scarf. The dog shifts once, then flops down in front of the hearth with a sigh that's almost human. Outside, the village sinks into stillness. The only sounds now are the wind whispering through the thatched roofs, the creak of timber, and the occasional owl. You close your eyes and drift in that strange middle place between sleep and waking, your body aching, your mind already running through tomorrow's chores. But for now, there's only warmth and silence. And Big Maud, probably plotting. The rooster crows, again, loudly. You've always suspected he waits until the exact moment your dream gets good, just to ruin it. Still, dawn is here, stretching long gray fingers across the beams of your low ceiling. You groan softly, roll over, and try to pretend your blanket is made of something thicker than dreams and stubborn hope. But the hearth is dead cold, and your mother's already moving about, stirring the embers and muttering about damp logs. You blink the sleep from your eyes and sit up, straw poking at your neck. Another day begins. This morning, like most, starts with animal care. You drag yourself outside, breath misting in the chill, and head toward the small pen where the pigs snuffle impatiently. They grunt and root at the ground, assuming you have something better than potato peels. You do not. One of them, the biggest, her name's Griselda, is eyeing your boots again. You toss the scraps into their trough and back away before she gets ideas. Feeding animals may sound relaxing, but medieval livestock are basically hairy toddlers with hooves. The cows are more agreeable, but not exactly cuddly. You check the thatch and wattle barn where the 2 milk cows reside. One of them is chewing slowly, contemplating the universe, or maybe just a splinter in her hay. You milk her carefully, hoping she's in a cooperative mood. Sometimes she isn't, and nothing wakes you up like a surprise back kick from a 900-pound animal with opinions. Back inside, your sister is helping with butter churning, an infamously tedious task that somehow takes forever even when you're going fast. The churn thuds rhythmically as she works the plunger. There's already fresh curds draining in a cloth bag by the hearth. Cheese is a constant companion in the medieval diet, partly because milk doesn't keep, and refrigeration hasn't been invented yet unless you count burying it in snow and pretending that works. Your family's pig is another form of slow-moving wealth, a living pantry, really. When it's finally slaughtered, every bit is used. Blood for pudding, fat for candles, intestines for sausage casings. Even the bladder gets inflated and handed to children as a toy. Yes, really. Historians still argue whether this was fun, or just what happens when you don't have toys and your options are pig bladder or a particularly round rock. You finish your rounds by checking the hayloft. There's not much left, and the hay that remains is slightly musty. You worry about making it through the full winter. If the animals get thin, they'll produce less. Less milk, less meat, less manure. And manure, believe it or not, is gold. You use it to fertilize the fields, warm the floors, and, occasionally, get into neighborhood arguments about whose cow made the mess outside the church door. The wind picks up, rattling the wooden shutter and slipping down your collar like an icy finger. You wrap your scarf tighter and head back to the fire, where your mother is now boiling something that smells faintly like leeks and regret. It'll be breakfast soon, maybe with a chunk of last night's barley bread, now hard enough to be legally classified as a blunt weapon. Your father enters, brushing bits of straw from his hair. "That cart axle still needs fixing," he mutters, mostly to himself. He pulls on his boots, their soles patched with layers of old leather. Tools are expensive. Metal is precious, so repairs become an art form. You've seen hinges made from bone, a plow mended with twine, and once a wheel held together with what you're pretty sure was part of someone's bed frame. Speaking of carts, transportation is a whole medieval adventure. Most villagers never travel more than 5 miles from home in their entire lives. Roads, if you can call them that, are muddy in spring, rutted in summer, frozen in winter, and more hole than path in autumn. You remember walking to the next village once for a feast day? Took hours, and you arrived with a blister the size of a walnut and half a shoe. Still, trade happens. Peddlers arrive now and then with buttons, ribbons, and the occasional miracle cure that's 80% wine and 20% nonsense. Once, a traveling knife grinder set up near the well, sharpening everything from scythes to scissors. Your uncle gave him an old blade that came back shiny, but bent like a banana. "Modern craftsmanship," he grumbled. "Your cousin's family keeps bees, which is probably the most dignified job a medieval peasant can have. Honey is rare and precious, and beeswax candles are a luxury usually reserved for the church." Watching him work, dressed in heavy cloth and moving gently among the buzzing hives, feels almost mystical. You once asked to try, got stung, cried, blamed the queen bee personally. Outside, you spot your neighbor leading his ox toward the field. The animal moves with a resigned plod that mirrors your own soul. Oxen are slow but strong. The medieval tractor before tractors were invented. One ox can plow an acre a day, assuming it doesn't wander off, drop dead, or decide it's had enough of you and sits down for the rest of eternity. You join him, helping guide the plow through the damp earth. The soil is sticky, clinging to your boots and dragging you down with every step. Your hands grip the plow's handles, splinters biting into your palms. The ox sighs like it too, wishes it were still in bed. At one point, the plow hits a rock. Not just a pebble. No, this thing is practically a boulder. You both stop, stare at it, and then begin the familiar dance. Dig, pry, curse, repeat. Eventually, with enough teamwork and accidental foot injuries, the rock gives way. Beneath it, you find a broken shard of old iron. Could be from a forgotten tool. Could be Roman. Hard to say. Historians still argue whether peasants recognized ancient relics or just saw them as shiny thing that broke my plow. You work until your muscles scream and the sun climbs higher, threatening to warm the earth but never quite managing it. A thin sheen of sweat forms under your tunic, promptly stolen by the breeze. You keep moving. That's the trick. In medieval life, stillness invites chill and rodents. Eventually, your father calls a halt. It's time to gather wood for the midday fire. You head into the edge of the woods with a few others, axes slung over shoulders, the sound of boots crunching on frost-bitten leaves. Gathering wood is a group affair, safer that way. Forests are useful but unsettling, dark, echoey, and full of the sense that something's watching you. Deer? Wolves? Possibly a monk who got lost and now lives with squirrels? You find fallen branches, some dry enough to burn without too much smoke. One of the younger boys tries to wrestle a thick limb loose from a dead tree, only to fall backward with a yelp as it snaps down unexpectedly. Everyone laughs. He grins. A good moment. They don't come often, but they're real. With your bundle of sticks slung over your shoulder, you head back to the village. Smoke rises from chimneys now, thin curls trailing into the pale sky. You feel the fire's promise already. Warmth, food, the scrape of spoon on bowl, the clink of wooden cups. It's not a comfortable life. It's not even a fair one. But it's yours. You return from the woods, your arms aching under the weight of firewood. Smoke drifts gently from a few chimneys, curling into the sky like lazy ribbons. The sun is reaching its peak, casting short shadows and warming the air just enough to fool you into thinking it might be spring. It is not. Your nose is still numb. At the cottage, your mother is already preparing the midday meal. Really more of a slightly warmer breakfast, only with fewer illusions. She stirs a pot with rhythmic resolve, and the scent of onion and lentils wafts toward you. You hand over the bundle of wood, and she grunts her approval, which is the medieval version of 5 gold stars and a hug. You're given a chunk of coarse bread and a bowl of hot gruel, which tastes like sadness with a hint of thyme. You wolf it down all the same. Hunger dulls the senses, or maybe it sharpens them, depending on whether you're the one doing the eating or the watching. After eating, the entire village gathers in the commons, an open patch of trampled earth where announcements are made. Disputes are aired and children inevitably step in something they shouldn't. Today, it's the Reeve's turn to speak. He's the village's appointed administrator, a kind of glorified hall monitor chosen by the Lord to keep the rest of you in line. He's got a belt pouch, a scroll, and a voice that sounds like he's always angry, even when he's complimenting your sheep. He announces that the next Lord's collection will be 2 weeks early this season. Groans ripple through the crowd. That means less time to prepare your portion of grain, eggs, and, depending on your holdings, a chicken or two. You don't technically own any of this, of course. The land belongs to the Lord. You just borrow it in exchange for a lifetime of back-breaking labor and the occasional awkward curtsy. Feudalism, folks. Catchy word. Terrible lifestyle. The Reeve finishes his speech with a reminder. All able-bodied men must report for road repair tomorrow. You sigh, and your father mutters something under his breath that sounds like, "I'd rather be trampled by the ox again." You don't disagree. Work like this, fixing roads, repairing fences, reinforcing the Lord's mill, is called corvée labor. It's unpaid, mandatory, and extremely unpopular. Historians still argue whether peasants considered it a duty, or just something to survive until their backs gave out. The rest of the afternoon is spent weaving. You sit near the fire with your mother, your fingers working the shuttle through the loom's taut threads. She hums under her breath, occasionally, correcting your technique. The rhythm of weaving is hypnotic. Click, pull, slide, tap. Again and again until the fabric begins to grow, slow and certain. Cloth is wealth. A bolt of wool could trade for tools, food, even livestock. Spinning, dyeing, weaving. It all takes weeks, sometimes months, and it's mostly done in households, like yours. Sometimes peddlers bring foreign cloth, fine linen from Flanders or silks that shimmer like dragon skin. You've seen them once or twice, touched the edge of a scarf so soft it felt like breath. And then you went back to your scratchy wool tunic and got on with it. The door creaks open. Your uncle steps in, shaking snow from his shoulders and holding a wrapped bundle. He's brought news from the next village, and a guest, a thin man in clerical robes, with a face like wrinkled parchment and a nose that could pierce armor. He's a scribe, here to help settle a land dispute between two families who both claim ownership of the same corner of turnip field. This is exciting. Visitors are rare, especially ones who can read and write. The scribe carries a small leather satchel full of papers, wax seals, and an ink pot carefully wrapped in linen. You stare, fascinated. He sees you, smiles faintly, and pulls out a small tablet of wax, his portable notebook. He shows you how he etches words into the surface with a stylus and then smooths them away with the flat end. It's like magic, but slightly smudgier. As the grown-ups argue about who owns what patch of mud, you listen in. The scribe writes down their statements, then promises to consult the manor rolls. These are records kept by the Lord Steward, lists of land, labor, fines and permissions. If your name's not on the rolls, your claims might as well be wishes whispered to the wind. After he leaves, your uncle pulls you aside and hands you something wrapped in cloth. A chunk of beeswax, some twine, and, miraculously, a real iron needle. You stare at it like it's a holy relic. Needles are precious. If you lose one, it's like misplacing a gold coin. Maybe worse. You spend the late afternoon mending. Your tunic has a hole under the arm from the last time you fell trying to herd an overly ambitious goat. Your sister's smock needs patching, and your father's cloak has come undone at the hem. Stitch by stitch, you bring the fabric back from the edge of ruin. It's slow, quiet work, and your thoughts drift like smoke. In the distance, you hear someone singing, a field worker maybe, or one of the shepherd boys tending flocks near the woods. The tune is old and lonesome, the kind of song that has no real beginning or end. You hum along, matching the rhythm with your needle. By now, the sun is starting its descent, casting long golden lines across the fields. The light slants through, the cracks in the wall, catching motes of dust like falling stars. You set aside your work and stretch. The dog wakes from its nap, yawns theatrically, and settles into a new, identical position, a foot to the left. Your mother asks you to fetch water for supper. You grab the pail and head for the village well. It's always a gathering spot. Half utility, half social network. A few women are already there, gossiping about someone's runaway pig and the widow who might be seeing the reeve. You roll your eyes but listen closely. In a place with no letters, rumors are the closest thing to a newspaper. You draw the water, slowly, the pulley creaking with effort. It's heavier than usual. You hope it's not because of another frog invasion. You pour it carefully into your pail, then trudge back, arms wobbling from the effort. It sloshes against your legs with every step. Supper is thinner than usual, mostly broth and a few leeks. But it's hot, and that's enough. You eat in silence, your mind already drifting towards sleep. The fire burns low. Your father mutters something about having to fix the thatch next week. Your mother counts how many eggs the hens have laid and scowls at the number. You finish your bowl, wipe your mouth with your sleeve, and set it by the hearth. Outside, the air is still and black, the stars pricking through the darkness like you wake to the sound of wind, not the gentle, whistling kind that sighs through trees like a lullaby, but the sharp, impatient kind that slaps shutters, rattles doors, and makes you question every life decision that's led to sleeping in a cottage with walls thinner than a bowl of broth. Today is Corvée Labor Day. Remember the Reeves announcement? Yep, it wasn't a dream. Your father is already outside, fiddling with a bent spade and muttering something unprintable about mud. You dress quickly, chewing a crust of bread so hard it threatens to take a tooth with it. You meet with a small group near the village edge, other men, boys, and the reeve himself, who carries a ledger like it's a sword. His job today is to oversee, which is medieval code for standing around with an expression that suggests everyone's doing it wrong. You trudge toward the rutted path that passes for the main road, where last week's rain carved gullies, deep enough to lose a cartwheel or a small child. The work begins with shoveling gravel and filling holes. Some of the gravel is more hopeful than useful. You dump a load into a divot only to watch it vanish like you've just offered a snack to the underworld. One guy tries to tamp it down with a log, but the log splits, and he swears under his breath, as splinters go flying. Another fetches fresh bundles of brushwood, fascines they're called, which you pack into the soggiest bits to form a semi-passable surface. This is known as making a corduroy road, and it sounds much fancier than it feels. Mostly, it's just walking on sticks that shift every time you step, making you feel like the world's clumsiest noble. You pause for a moment to wipe your brow, and the reeve gives you a look. You know the one. You get back to work, muttering your own under-the-breath grievances about people who wear cloaks instead of calluses. Not all roads are equal. This particular stretch leads to the manor and the church, so it gets more attention. Paths to outlying fields or cottages often fall apart completely, left to the mercy of the seasons and the occasional sheep stampede. Historians still argue whether the poor upkeep of rural roads was neglect or simply triage in a world where survival itself ranked higher than smooth travel. At midday, you're given a break. Everyone collapses near a stone wall, passing around whatever food they managed to bring. Your contribution? A hunk of cheese that smells like it lost a fight with time. Still, it's edible. And that's the only qualification you require these days. A passing monk joins your group, greeting you with a cheerful Pax Vobiscum, and accepting a bite of bread in exchange for a brief sermonette about humility and mud. He's on his way to a nearby shrine. Pilgrims still pass through now and then, drawn to a spring said to heal ailments, or at least give you an exciting rash. The monk has a walking staff with a bell on top and a satchel full of holy trinkets, most of which look suspiciously like things you've seen in your neighbor's trash heap. You return to work, belly slightly fuller but spirits no higher. This time, it's drainage ditches. You use crude hose and shovels to deepen the gullies beside the road, hoping to coax rainwater into staying there rather than sloshing straight onto the path. One older man falls in. You laugh. He laughs. Then everyone sighs and hauls him out, before the reeve can find someone for misuse of village resources. The truth is, corvée labor keeps the community stitched together in strange ways. You grumble about it, dread it, occasionally fake a sprained ankle to avoid it. But it's also one of the few times you see everyone at once. Gossip flows, debates spark. Sometimes someone even brings a jug of cider and forgets to mention it to the reeve. Later in the day, the work shifts to the manor's fence, which has suffered a recent goat-related incident. You and 2 others are sent to patch it using wattle. Flexible sticks woven into the frame like a giant basket. The process is rhythmic, even satisfying, except for the constant threat of splinters and one persistent goat who keeps trying to help. As you weave the hazel rods, someone nearby mentions the village ghost again. The spectral figure supposedly seen on the far edge of the woods, always just out of sight. Half the group laughs. The other half crosses themselves. You pretend not to care, but your back prickles a little anyway. Night approaches, casting long purple shadows over the road. You finish your section, shoulders sore, hands raw. The reeve gives a curt nod, which is about as close to well done as you'll ever get from him. You trudge home under a sky turning indigo, your feet dragging with every step. Back at the cottage, supper is already underway. Your mother stirs a pot while your siblings squabble over the last heel of bread. You sink onto a stool, not bothering, to remove your boots and accept a bowl of stew without question. It could be turnip. It could be shoe. You'd eat it either way. As you eat, your father talks about the drainage issue by the west field, and your mother mentions that the miller's apprentice broke a gear again. Everyone nods, the rhythm of village life continuing like the creak of an old wheel. Sometimes loud, sometimes slow, always turning. Later you sit by the fire with your youngest sibling in your lap. You tell her a story. Half-remembered legend, half-fabricated nonsense, about a brave fox who outwitted a knight and stole a golden egg from under his pillow. She laughs, and you do too. And for a few minutes, the cold and the blisters don't seem quite so heavy. Eventually, your eyelids grow heavy, and you crawl into your shared straw bed, pulling the rough blanket over your shoulders. The wind has quieted now, but the fire still pops gently in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the wall. It wasn't a glamorous day. It wasn't even a good day. But it was a real one. And in the life of a medieval villager, that counts for more than you think. You wake up sore. Not, maybe I slept funny sore. This is full on. Did someone beat me with a rake? Sore. Your legs ache from squatting in ditches. Your arms feel like sacks of wet flour, and even your fingers complain when you flex them. You sigh, roll, over on your straw mattress, and immediately regret that decision. as a bit of chaff jabs your cheek like an accusatory finger. Still, there's no sleeping in. Not here. Not ever. Not unless you're old enough to be respectably useless. Or you've got a church-sanctioned illness, preferably one with an impressive rash. So you rise, stretch carefully to avoid snapping in half, and begin the morning routine again. Outside, the village is already buzzing with quiet energy. Smoke snakes up from hearths. Chickens cluck judgmentally from beneath carts. And someone's toddler is already eating dirt. Business as usual. Today, you're off to the market. Not a big city market, mind you. This is more of a local fair. Day set up just outside the nearby manor, where peddlers and traders come to hawk their wares to wide-eyed villagers like yourself. It only happens every so often, so it's half economy, half spectacle, and all chaos. You load the family's trade goods into a small handcart, some woven baskets, a few clay pots your uncle made, and a jar of dried herbs your mother insists are good for everything. You suspect they're mostly just crushed leaves and wishful thinking, but she's got a look in her eye that dares you to say so. You trudge the 2 miles to the market path, passing other villagers doing the same. Someone has a goose in a sling. Another carries 2 wheels of hard cheese strung from a pole like medieval kettlebells. The air smells like trampled grass and fried dough. Yes, even the Middle Ages had treats, sometimes called fritters, because deep frying is humanity's one true shared religion. The market is set up in a loose circle of tents and carts. There's a cloth merchant from the south with fabrics dyed bright red using crushed insects. Cochineal, it's called, though you don't know that word. All you know is it looks like royalty, and it probably costs the same as a small cow. There's a tanner selling belts and shoes that reek of lie and mystery. And of course the spice man, a wiry fellow with tiny jars of powder he claims are from the edge of the known world. You sniff a jar of ground ginger and nearly sneeze your brain out of your ears. The merchant laughs and offers you a sample of dried dates. You've never tasted anything like it. Sweet, sticky, and with the distinct aftertaste of luxury you can't afford. You thank him and shuffle along before you get any ideas. Your family finds a spot near the edge of the square and lays out your goods. It's not glamorous, but a few people stop by. You trade a basket for a handful of dried fish, and one of the pots goes to a visiting merchant who's either very kind or just desperate for change. Someone offers you a small coin for your mother's herbs, which she accepts with the air of a queen granting a boon. This little coin, probably a silver penny, though clipped and worn, is valuable. Coinage is rare in village life. Most of your economy runs on barter, labor, and mutual exhaustion. But coins do show up now and then, and they're deeply fascinating. Historians still argue whether coin flow in rural areas was steady enough to matter, or just a sparkly rumor most peasants heard about from someone's cousin who once saw a bishop sneeze into a gold handkerchief. A few hours pass like this. You try to avoid the quack doctor selling a bottle of what he calls miracle water, but smells suspiciously like spoiled cider. You eye the sweet cakes on a tray nearby, but the price tag, in coin or chicken, is far too high. Still, the smells are free, and you inhale them like a thief. The town crier, more shouting enthusiast than journalist, wanders past, ringing his bell and yelling the latest news from the Lord's estate. There's been a new marriage, a new tax, and guess what? A new rule about selling chickens on Sundays. You pretend to care. You do not. At midday, musicians set up in the center. A fiddler, a flutist, and someone banging what might once have been a drum. The tunes are lively, the kind that make your feet tap, even if your back's still writing passive-aggressive notes to your spine. People dance. Not well. And certainly, not gracefully, but with full commitment. A dog joins in, spinning in frantic circles until it gets distracted by a sausage. You sit and watch, chewing on a bit of bread and feeling for once like you're part of something bigger. A community. A world. A chaotic, itchy, exhausting world. But yours all the same. Later in the day, you take a turn exploring alone. You pass a bookseller with exactly 4 books and the look of a man who would sell his soul for an ink refill. You pause at a stall of charms and trinkets, tiny carvings said to ward off evil spirits. One catches your eye. A little pewter owl with wide eyes and a chipped beak. The woman behind the stall smiles and says it's a protector of dreams. You trade a length of thread and a promise to help repair her wheel next week. She gives you the owl. Will it actually protect your dreams? Probably not. But hey, neither does your straw pillow. As the sun begins to dip, traders start packing up. You help load the cart again. Now lighter in goods, heavier in trade items. Your mother counts your earnings with squinted eyes, then pats your head in a rare show of affection. Didn't lose anything. Didn't insult anyone important. That's a good day. You trudge back home as twilight settles, the sky painted in streaks of pink and gold. Your feet are sore, your pockets are mostly empty, and your shoulders carry just a little less weight than when you left. The owl charm rests in your palm. Cool, solid, slightly ridiculous, just like life in the village. You wake to a gray sky that hangs low like a damp blanket. The village smells like yesterday's rain and something vaguely burnt. Probably the baker trying to get a second chance at breakfast. No matter. You pull your cloak tighter, the rough wool scratching at your neck like a reminder that comfort is a luxury for knights and monks. Today is church day, which means you'll drag yourself to the stone building at the village's heart, where everyone gathers in a silence so heavy it presses against your ears. The church is more than just a place of worship. It's the community's heartbeat, its calendar, and frankly, the best source of gossip outside the market. You enter through the wooden doors, their iron hinges creaking like an old man's sigh. Inside, the cool air smells of incense, beeswax, and something faintly sour, leftover from too many rushed candles and too few cleaning hands. The congregation fills the wooden pews, murmuring in a mix of Latin phrases and the local tongue. You sit near the back, close enough to hear the priest's booming voice, but far enough to avoid his piercing glare when he notices someone not paying attention. The priest begins with a sermon about sin, salvation, and the dangers of greed. His voice rises and falls like a tide, pulling you in and pushing you away. You try to focus, but your mind drifts to the strange statue near the altar. A carved figure with a dog's head, which no one can quite explain. Some say it's a saint's companion, others whisper. It's a warning against bad behavior. Historians still argue whether these odd carvings were religious symbolism or medieval inside jokes. After the sermon, the choir stands. Their voices rise in unison, filling the stone walls with music that's equal parts haunting and beautiful. You notice a little girl in the front row, her voice trembling as she hits a high note that makes the local dogs howl in sympathetic agony. You smile. Even in the Middle Ages, karaoke was rough. Following the service, the villagers spill outside into the churchyard. Gravestones lean at odd angles, some barely legible, others covered in moss. It's both peaceful and unsettling, a reminder that life here moves in cycles of hope and sorrow. Today is also a special feast day. The priest announces that after the service, there will be a communal meal and games in the village square. You feel a spark of excitement. These rare moments of celebration break up the relentless grind of daily chores. You help your mother prepare food, coarse bread, salted pork, a stew made from root vegetables, and whatever herbs survive the winter. The kitchen buzzes with energy and the scent of spices you can't quite name. In the afternoon, the village square fills with laughter and music. Children chase each other, while adults share news and wine. There's a contest of strength, where the strongest man tries to lift a massive stone. He grunts, strains, and finally manages a wobbly hoist that sends the crowd cheering. You cheer too, but inwardly wonder how many backs this stunt has broken over the years. Nearby, a juggler dazzles the crowd with knives, barely missing a finger as he tosses them high into the air. His hat collects coins, which you suspect he needs for more than just ale. You notice the village fool weaving through the crowd. He wears a patchwork tunic and a hat with bells, and his antics draw chuckles and eye rolls in equal measure. Legend has it fools held a unique position. They could mock nobles and clergy alike without fear of punishment, or so they claimed. Historians still debate how much freedom fools actually had, versus how much was staged entertainment. As twilight deepens, torches are lit, casting flickering light on smiling faces and eager shadows. You sit beside the fire, watching the stars blink awake overhead. The scent of smoke mingles with the earth and faint echoes of laughter. You think about the strange dog-headed statue, the juggler's knives, the heavy stone, and the simple joy of this feast. Life is rough, unpredictable, and often unfair. But it's also filled with moments like these, when the whole village breathes as one. You tuck the owl charm from the market into your pocket, feeling its cool weight. Tomorrow, the grind begins again, but tonight, you let yourself rest. The morning sun creeps through your window, painting your face with pale light and forcing you to open your eyes against your will. You sit up slowly, your body creaking in protest after yesterday's feast and the rough sleep that followed. Your joints sound like the village cart's wheels, squeaky and in desperate need of oil. Outside, the village is waking, but the mood feels different today. There's a hum of urgency beneath the usual chatter, like the calm before a storm, or the moment you realize you forgot your best shoes at the market. You quickly learn that the Lord Steward has arrived, riding a horse that looks as smug as a cat in a sunny window. He's here to inspect the village's taxes and labor records, a ritual that everyone dreads but accepts with the resigned grace of someone who's had their bread stolen by squirrels one too many times. You gather with other villagers in the square, watching as the steward unfurls his scrolls and listens to the Reeve's stammered explanations. You know that any discrepancy in the records could mean extra work, higher taxes, or worse, confiscation of goods. The steward's sharp eyes miss nothing, and his pen scratches like a raven tapping on a coffin. As the inspection drags on, you overhear whispers about the Lord's new plans. He wants to build a larger mill upstream, a project that promises to bring more money, but will require more labor and resources from the village. Some villagers look hopeful, others wary. After all, more work doesn't always mean better life. You're assigned to help prepare a detailed inventory of your household's goods, tools, livestock, stored grain, all carefully counted and noted. This feels invasive, like letting a stranger rifle through your drawers while you watch helplessly. In the afternoon, you're called to the manor to deliver some of the inventory yourself. Walking up the gravel path, you notice the manor's walls look less threatening today. Maybe because you know they're mostly just inside. The steward's hall is filled with scribes and clerks, all busily recording, calculating, and generally making everyone nervous. The air smells of ink, dust, and expensive leather. While waiting your turn, you overhear a heated debate among the clerks about the accuracy of recent harvest reports. Some argue the yields were better than reported. Others insist numbers were padded to reduce the tax burden. Historians still argue whether these medieval accounting disputes were common practice or signs of an emerging bureaucracy struggling to understand itself. Finally, the steward calls your name. You step forward, balancing a ledger and a basket of goods. He inspects everything with a critical eye, nods once or twice, then moves on. You breathe out slowly, returning to the village. You notice how everyone seems quieter, more subdued. The weight of scrutiny lingers like a bad smell. Back home, your family gathers to discuss what this inspection means. Your mother worries about the extra work, your father grumbles about fairness, and your siblings mostly argue over who gets to carry the leftover bread. You think about the delicate balance the village maintains between survival, obedience, and quiet resistance. You remember the juggler's knives and the fool's bells, symbols of chaos within order. At night, you dream of scales tipping and papers flying, but also of quiet strength beneath those stones. Because, in this medieval village, life is a constant negotiation with power, with nature, and with hope. Dawn breaks with a chill that nips at your fingers like an impatient child tugging at a sleeve. Today is the day of harvest, the most grueling and important work in the village calendar. You wake with a mixture of dread and determination, knowing that the entire community's survival depends on this labor. The fields stretch before you like a golden sea, waving gently under a pale sky. Your breath forms little clouds in the crisp air as you step into worn boots, feeling the rough texture of your gloves. The sickle in your hand feels heavy and oddly comforting, its curved blade gleaming faintly. Neighbors gather silently, some already singing old work songs meant to keep spirits high and hands moving. You join in, your voice shaky at first, but growing steadier with each verse. The songs are as old as the village itself, some claim, though historians still argue whether these were truly medieval or added later by romantic storytellers. The work is relentless. You bend, cut, gather, and bundle stalks of grain, your muscles burning and your skin prickling with sweat despite the chill. Every few minutes someone calls out, "Steady," or "Watch your fingers." There's a shared rhythm in the toil, a collective heartbeat syncing with the sun's arc. At one point, you notice an old man sitting by the hedge, carefully weaving straw into a tiny, intricate crown. You watch as his fingers twist and knot, creating something delicate from what others might toss away. He tells you it's a harvest crown, meant to honor the spirit of the fields and bring good fortune. You wonder if it really works, but then again, so does that pewter owl charm back home. Lunch is a brief, noisy affair, a mix of coarse bread, sharp cheese, and watered-down ale. You trade stories with a few fellow harvesters about last year's crop failures, rumors of a bad winter ahead, and the Lord's new tax plans. The talk is pragmatic, laced with superstition, and sometimes downright bleak. But no one dares say they'll quit. This work is what you were born to do. In the afternoon, the sun climbs higher and the heat intensifies. Sweat drips into your eyes, making the world blur. You stumble but catch yourself, gritting your teeth and pushing on. The sickle's blade flashes again and again, cutting through stalks like a steady heartbeat. Toward the end of the day, a sudden gust of wind sweeps across the field, sending dust and chaff swirling like miniature storms. For a moment, the world looks wild and untamed, reminding you that despite all the effort, nature still calls the shots. As dusk settles, the bundles of grain lie stacked and ready for threshing. You're exhausted, every bone aching and every breath heavy. But there's pride too, a quiet satisfaction in having taken part in this ancient ritual. Later, gathered around the fire, villagers share tales of past harvests, some filled with triumph, others shadowed by famine and disease. Someone pulls out a battered fiddle, and the music begins, raw and imperfect but full of life. You lie back on your straw mattress that night, muscles throbbing, the faint scent of hay lingering in your hair. You clutch the pewter owl in your hand, feeling the weight of tradition and toil. Life in the village is hard, unpredictable, and often unfair. But it's also a story of resilience, woven from sweat, song, and stubborn hope. The morning fog wraps around the village like a soft, damp blanket, muffling sounds and turning familiar shapes into ghostly silhouettes. You step outside, boots sinking slightly into the moist earth. Today's task feels different, less about physical labor and more about ritual, a blend of practicality and superstition that defines much of village life. The blacksmith's forge glows in the distance, orange sparks dancing as he pounds iron into shape. Nearby, you spot the village healer, an older woman with hands stained by herbs and years of practice, preparing salves and potions. Her little garden is a tangled mess of plants that smell earthy and sharp, some with leaves curled like old scrolls. She tells you the difference between valerian and mugwort, and how the latter might keep nightmares at bay. You wonder if your pewter owl has similar powers. Today, you're helping prepare tools and offerings for the upcoming festival of St. John, the midsummer celebration marked by fire, dance, and old customs that some say go back to pagan times. The festival promises a brief reprieve from daily toil, but it also carries a hint of danger. The bonfires are huge, and not everyone trusts the villagers' ability to control them. You and others gather around the central square, stacking firewood and weaving garlands from wildflowers. The air is thick with anticipation and the scent of fresh pine. The blacksmith arrives, carrying a freshly forged iron horseshoe, which he nails above the village gate, a charm against evil spirits, and children dart between adults, their laughter echoing beneath the gray sky. They chase each other with sticks, pretending to be knights or dragons. You smile, remembering your own childhood games, and wonder if the stories you heard back then were meant to teach or simply to entertain. As dusk falls, villagers dress in their best clothes, simple but clean, patched but proud. The priest blesses the fires, muttering prayers that seem both solemn and nervous. Someone starts a fiddle, the melody weaving through the crowd like smoke. When the bonfire is lit, flames leap high, casting flickering shadows on faces both joyous and wary. The heat presses against your skin, and you feel a thrill mixed with fear. There's a superstition that the fire's smoke carries prayers to the heavens and burns away evil, though no one can say for sure if it really works. People begin to dance, circling the fire with a wildness that feels ancient and freeing. The rhythm is hypnotic, pulling you into the movement despite the ache in your legs. You catch a glimpse of the village fool, his bells jingling in time, and wonder if his laughter hides wisdom. As the night deepens, some villagers jump over the embers, an act said to bring good luck, but also a test of courage. You think about trying it, but decide your bruises from harvest season are punishment enough for 1 year. The festival winds down with shared stories and softened voices. The village feels alive, connected, not just by work, but by tradition, belief, and a collective need to believe in something more than mere survival. You tuck the iron horseshoe charm alongside your pewter owl, little tokens in a world that often feels unpredictable and harsh. In these moments, amid firelight and music, you understand that life in this medieval village is not just about enduring. It's about belonging. The sun hangs low and orange in the sky, casting long shadows that stretch like lazy cats across the village paths. You step outside, feeling the familiar crunch of gravel underfoot, mixed with stray bits of hay and the occasional forgotten apple core. Today is Market Day, a rare and eagerly anticipated event that breaks the village's routine with a burst of color, sound, and, well, chaos. The market isn't just about buying and selling, it's the social hub, the place where news travels faster than the fastest horse. Vendors call out their wares in a mix of local dialect and the lingua franca of traders, a language patchworked from Latin, French, and scraps of other tongues. You weave between stalls piled high with pottery, cloth dyed in shades you can't name, and jars of honey that smell like summer itself. You stop by the apothecary's stand, where dried herbs hang in bundles and curious bottles glint like jewels in the sunlight. The apothecary offers a tincture rumored to cure everything from headaches to broken hearts. You raise an eyebrow but decide to stick with the healer's advice. You know, the one who can't quite explain why her potions sometimes work. Near the edge of the market, a troupe of performers has set up a small stage. Their leader, a woman, with a mischievous smile and eyes that sparkle like the dawn, juggles flaming torches with a flair that draws a crowd. You watch as the flames twist and turn, wondering how she manages not to singe her eyebrows. The troops' antics remind you of the village fool. Though these performers seem more polished, their act rehearsed rather than spontaneous. A merchant offers you a strange-looking fruit from a distant land, something called a quince. You bite into it cautiously. It's tart, with a fragrance that lingers long after the taste fades. You think about how goods travel from faraway places, carried by long routes over land and sea. Historians still argue how medieval trade networks truly operated, whether they were tightly controlled by kingdoms or surprisingly free-flowing like rivers. The chatter shifts as news spreads. A new law from the Lord's court might change how taxes are collected, possibly making life harder for villagers. You catch snippets of worried whispers, but also defiant laughter, because no law can fully tame the spirit of this place. As the sun dips behind the hills, the market begins to close. You carry home a small bag of spices and a loaf of fresh bread, the scent warm and comforting. You think about the layers of life this market represents: commerce, culture, survival, and the occasional spark of magic. Back home, you watch the village settle under twilight's soft blanket. The market's energy lingers, a reminder that even in hard times, connection